It was a text message that ripped my heart wide open. "Don't come to the wedding," my mom wrote. "You and your kids just make things awkward." And right there, a laughing emoji from my own sister, Natalie, confirming the betrayal. My world went silent. But in the family group chat, the laughter kept buzzing, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to break. I'm Randy, 34 years old, and a single mom to two amazing kids. That morning, just 3 weeks before Natalie's wedding, my phone buzzed while I was making breakfast. What I read was a calculated dagger, twisting in a wound that had been festering for years. "Randy, we think it's best if you don't come to the wedding. You and your kids just make things awkward, and we want this day to be perfect for Natalie." The eggs on the stove started to burn, forgotten. My sister's laughing emoji flashed across the screen, a final, cruel punctuation mark. Fighting back a torrent of tears, a fierce resolve hardened inside me. I typed my reply, each word a stone in my gut. "Then you won't need my car for the venue." The family group chat, still oblivious, exploded with more laughter. They had no idea what they just unleashed. Growing up in our middle-class suburban neighborhood in Westlake, Ohio, I always knew my place in the family hierarchy. My mother, Diane, was the quintessential perfectionist, a woman whose entire identity revolved around appearances and what the neighbors might think. Our house was always spotless, our clothes always pressed, and our family photos always looked like they belonged in a magazine. But behind that polished exterior lay a complicated web of favoritism and impossible standards. From as early as I can remember, my sister Natalie was the golden child. 3 years younger than me, with naturally blonde hair and a petite figure that matched my mother's ideal of feminine beauty, Natalie seemed to effortlessly embody everything my mother valued. She was captain of the cheerleading squad, homecoming queen, and graduated with honors before pursuing a business degree, just like Mom had always wanted for herself. I, on the other hand, was the designated black sheep. I had wild curly hair that refused to be tamed, preferred sketch pads to pom-poms, and questioned authority in ways that mortified my status-conscious mother. By 16, I knew I wanted to pursue a creative career, something my mother dismissed as a hobby, not a real job. When I announced my intention to major in graphic design, my mother actually cried at the dinner table, lamenting how I was throwing away my potential, while Natalie patted her hand sympathetically, her eyes holding a familiar blend of pity and superiority. The divide between us grew even wider when I got pregnant with Tyler at 24. I was in my final year of college, and the relationship with Tyler's father had ended months before I discovered I was pregnant. When I told my family, my mother's first words weren't of support or concern, but a hissed, "What will people think?" Natalie, fresh from receiving her MBA and starting her career at a prestigious marketing firm, looked at me with that same mixture of pity and superiority. But this time, it burned worse than my mother's outright disappointment. "Oh, Randy," she'd said, "how are you going to manage a baby? You can barely manage yourself," while my mother nodded in agreement. Despite their complete lack of support, I finished my degree while pregnant, gave birth to Tyler between my final exams, and graduated 3 weeks later with my newborn in my arms and no family in the audience. Those early years were brutally hard. I worked freelance design jobs from my tiny apartment, learning to nurse while typing with one hand and surviving on very little sleep. My mother would occasionally visit, but these visits were more like inspections, filled with criticism about everything from the formula I used to the second-hand furniture in my apartment. "You should have thought about all this before getting pregnant," she'd say whenever I mentioned being tired or stressed. Her assistance always came with conditions and criticisms, making it clear that my situation was a burden and an embarrassment. For years after Tyler was born, I met David. He was kind, creative, and for 2 years I thought we might build a life together. Emma came along, a beautiful surprise that initially brought David and me closer. But by the time Emma turned 2, the relationship had deteriorated. David's career as a musician meant a regular income and long absences. Eventually, he moved to Los Angeles to pursue a recording opportunity, effectively leaving us behind with promises to stay involved that gradually faded into occasional video calls and missed child support payments. So, There I was at 28, a single mother of two wonderful but energetic children, making it work through sheer determination and a growing reputation as a reliable graphic designer who could deliver quality work on tight deadlines. I had built a home business that allowed me to be there for school pickups and sick days, working late into the night after the kids were asleep to meet client demands. Family gatherings became exercises in endurance. My mother would fuss over Natalie's career achievements and dating life, while making pointed comments about my children's behavior or my appearance. "Randy, you might want to try that new diet I read about," she'd say loudly across the Thanksgiving table. Or, "Can't you get Tyler to sit still for 5 minutes?" Natalie was never so fidgety as a child. The comparisons were endless and always unfavorable. Natalie's apartment in the trendy part of town versus my modest 3-bedroom rental. Natalie's designer wardrobe versus my practical mom clothes. Natalie's business trips to New York versus my rare treats of taking the kids to the local amusement park. The worst part was watching my children absorb these dynamics. Tyler, perceptive and sensitive, began to withdraw around his grandmother and aunt. Emma, naturally bubbly and affectionate, would try harder and harder for their approval, only to be corrected for being too loud or too messy. Still, I persisted in maintaining family connections. I brought the kids to Sunday dinners twice a month. I remembered everyone's birthdays with thoughtful, often handmade gifts that were received with polite but underwhelmed thanks. I volunteered to host holidays when I could afford it, enduring my mother's subtle rearranging of my decorations and not-so-subtle improvements to my cooking. Family is family, I would tell myself. The kids deserve to know their relatives, even if those relatives are deeply flawed. Then came the family dinner 6 months ago, where Natalie announced her engagement to James, the son of Harold Wilson, who owned the largest real estate development company in our county. My mother practically vibrated with excitement, already envisioning the social boost this connection would provide. "Just think," Diane, James's mother, had apparently said, "our grandchildren will have the best of everything." I watched my mother's eyes slide over to Tyler and Emma, who were quietly playing a card game at the far end of the table, and knew exactly what she was thinking. In her mind, they weren't part of that grandchildren equation. They were the complications, the less-than-perfect extensions of her less-than-perfect daughter. As everyone toasted the happy couple, I smiled and offered my congratulations, already sensing that this wedding was about to become yet another battlefield in our family's long-running war of appearances versus reality. The engagement set off a flurry of activity that initially included me. To my surprise, I received a call from my mother the very next day. "Randy, we're having a preliminary wedding planning lunch on Saturday. Natalie would like you to be there," she said, her tone implying this was a great honor being bestowed upon me. "Eleanor Wilson will be joining us, so please wear something appropriate." The pause before appropriate spoke volumes, but I chose to focus on the positive. Maybe this wedding would bring our family closer together. Maybe Natalie genuinely wanted my involvement. That Saturday, I arrived at the upscale restaurant my mother had selected, wearing my nicest blouse and the only pair of dress pants I owned that didn't have a trace of kid-related stains. Emma had been fighting a cold that morning, so I'd had to scramble to find a last-minute babysitter, making me 7 minutes late. My mother's tight smile, when I slipped into the empty chair, told me those 7 minutes had been noted and filed away as yet another of my failings. Eleanor Wilson was exactly as I had imagined her, expensively dressed, perfectly coiffed, and radiating the confidence of old money. She assessed me with a quick glance that somehow took in every detail, from my scuffed flats to my frizzy hair that the morning's humidity had already begun to affect. "This is Diane's older daughter, Randy." Natalie introduced me with a wave of her newly manicured hand, the massive diamond on her finger catching the light. "She does some kind of computer art or something." "I'm a graphic designer," I corrected gently, extending my hand to Eleanor. "Lovely to meet you. Congratulations on your son's engagement." The lunch proceeded with detailed discussions of potential venues, guest lists, and color schemes. Every time I offered a suggestion, it was politely acknowledged and then immediately dismissed. What about incorporating some personal elements into the invitations? I ventured. I'd be happy to design something custom for Natalie and James, maybe with elements that represent their relationship or interests. Oh, that's so sweet, Eleanor replied, patting my hand. But we've already been in contact with Harringtons. They've done all the society weddings in this area for generations. Very exclusive. My mother beamed at this while Natalie nodded enthusiastically. They did Melissa Porter's wedding last year. You know, the one featured in Ohio Bride magazine. I nodded and took a long sip of water, swallowing my offer along with my pride. As the weeks went by, the wedding planning continued with decreasing levels of my involvement. I'd receive occasional texts about decisions that had already been made, framed as updates rather than invitations for input. The only area where my participation seemed actively desired was financial. We found the perfect venue, my mother announced during a rare phone call. The Grand Pavilion at Lakeside Gardens. It's absolutely stunning, but with all the extras Natalie deserves, it's running a bit higher than our budget. The careful pause told me what was coming next. I don't suppose you could contribute anything for your sister's special day. Despite my tight finances, I offered $5,000 toward the venue. It would mean dipping into my emergency fund and postponing some home repairs, but I wanted to show my support in a tangible way. My mother's relieved thanks and promises that I would be fully involved going forward seemed worth the sacrifice. Shortly after that, Tyler and Emma came bounding into the kitchen one evening, faces alight with excitement. Aunt Natalie called. Tyler announced. She asked if I want to be a junior groomsman, and Emma gets to be a flower girl. My heart warmed, seeing their enthusiasm. Perhaps things were turning around. Maybe my contribution had helped secure my children's places in the wedding party, showing that we truly were included in this family milestone. That weekend, the four of us went shopping for potential outfits. Tyler needed a suit that could be tailored to match the groomsmen, and Emma needed a flower girl dress that would complement the bridesmaids. My mother insisted on joining us, claiming her expert I was needed. The shopping trip quickly devolved into a stress fest. My mother criticized everything from Emma's hair. Couldn't you at least have braided it properly? To Tyler's posture, stand up straight, for goodness sake. You look like a hooligan. When Emma accidentally knocked over a mannequin in her excitement, my mother's face went rigid with embarrassment. This is precisely why children need proper discipline, she hissed at me in the changing room. How are they going to behave at an elegant wedding if they can't even control themselves in a department store? Before I could defend my children, I overheard her on the phone in the store hallway. Her voice was low but clear enough. Yes, Natalie, we're trying on things now. I know. Yes, it's exactly what we feared. The children are completely wild, and Randy just lets them run amok. I understand your concerns. Yes, it might complicate things having them in the wedding party. We'll discuss it more later. My stomach clenched. Despite their initial inclusion, my children were now being reevaluated as potential liabilities rather than beloved family members to be celebrated. Over the following weeks, I made several attempts to connect with Natalie privately about the wedding plans. I texted, called, and even suggested meeting for coffee, but she always had an excuse. She was swamped with work, in the middle of tastings, or just heading into a meeting with a planner. Then came the bridal shower I knew nothing about until I saw the photos on social media. My cousins, aunts, mother, and even neighbors from our childhood home were there, all raising champagne glasses in celebration. The caption read, "Showering our beautiful bride with love hashtag Natalia and James hashtag perfect pair." I stared at those photos for hours, searching the backgrounds for any sign that my absence had been noticed. There was none. They all looked perfectly happy, perfectly complete without me. Around the same time, I heard through my Aunt Susan that James's parents had hosted a formal dinner to meet Natalie's family. All of Natalie's family, apparently, except for me and my children. When I casually mentioned this to my mother on our next phone call, she brushed it off. It was very last minute, very small, just immediate family. The phrase immediate family hung between us, its meaning clear. In their minds, I had somehow been reclassified as extended family, or perhaps no family at all. Rumors from other relatives began reaching me. Cousin Beth mentioned that my mother had told her I was too busy with work to participate in wedding activities. Uncle Robert asked if it was true that I had opted out of wedding planning because I was uncomfortable with formal events. Finally, after weeks of evasion and misinformation, I directly asked Natalie about my role in the wedding. So, what exactly am I doing for the ceremony? Is there a specific dress color I should be looking for? And are Tyler and Emma still in the wedding party? I need to make sure their outfits are ready. Her response was vague and non-committal. We're still figuring out some details. The wedding party is getting kind of large, so we might need to make some adjustments. I'll let you know. I hung up with a sinking feeling that those adjustments would involve erasing my family from the picture entirely. Still, I clung to hope that I was overreacting, that surely my own mother and sister wouldn't completely exclude us from such an important family event, especially after I had committed a significant sum to the venue. I was wrong. The message arrived on a Thursday morning, exactly 3 weeks before the wedding date. I was in the kitchen making breakfast for the kids before school. My phone, charging on the counter, chimed repeatedly with family group chat notifications. I glanced over, catching glimpses of conversation about final wedding arrangements. My mother had created this chat ostensibly to keep everyone in the loop about wedding details, though it had primarily been used to showcase Natalie's ongoing princess treatment. That morning, the conversation had started innocuously enough, with my mother posting photos of the final floral arrangements and table settings. "Everything is coming together beautifully," she wrote. "Just a few last-minute details to sort out." Natalie chimed in with, "I can't believe it's only 3 weeks away." James's mom says the RSVPs from their side are all in. "Dad, can you follow up with Cousin Roger? He still hasn't responded." I was about to set my phone down and finish getting the kids ready when my mother's next text stopped me cold. "Randy, we think it's best if you don't come to the wedding. You and your kids just make things awkward, and we want this day to be perfect for Natalie." I froze, spatula in hand, eggs beginning to burn on the stove. Before I could even process this, Natalie responded with a laughing emoji and the message, "Mom's right. No offense, but James's family is really classy." The phone nearly slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. I shut off the stove mechanically, my mind racing to make sense of what I was reading in plain text on my screen. Surely, this was some kind of terrible joke. But as I stood there, more messages appeared. My mother again. "It's nothing personal, Randy. It's just that the Wilsons have certain expectations about the type of event this will be. Children who aren't properly behaved would be a distraction. Natalie. Plus, you always look so stressed and tired in photos. This wedding is going to be in all the local magazines." My mother. "We still appreciate the venue contribution, of course." That was very generous. I felt like I'd been physically struck. The kitchen around me seemed to wobble slightly as tears blurred my vision. A small voice broke through my shock. "Mom, the eggs are burning. Mom, are you okay? You're crying." Tyler stood beside me, his 10-year-old face creased with concern. Behind him, Emma was carefully arranging her stuffed animals at the breakfast table, blissfully unaware of the family earthquake that had just occurred. I quickly wiped my eyes and forced a smile. "I'm fine, buddy. Just got something in my eye. Thanks for telling me about the eggs. Let's make some new ones." As I cracked fresh eggs into the pan with trembling hands, I felt my shock beginning to transform into something else. A deep, burning anger rose up from somewhere primal inside me. How dare they treat my children this way? How dare they act as if we were embarrassing accessories rather than family members? I picked up my phone and typed a response, working hard to keep my tone controlled and dignified despite the rage and hurt coursing through me. "Then you won't need my card for the venue." It was simple, direct, and apparently hilarious to my family. Natalie immediately responded with another laughing emoji. "Good one, sis, but seriously, the venue deposit is non-refundable, so thanks for that." My mother added, "Don't be dramatic, Randy. This is about what's best for your sister's special day." Then my father, who had been silent until now, chimed in with, "Your mother's right, Randy. Sometimes it's better to step back. No need to make this about you." More messages flooded in from other family members who had been silently watching this public execution of my dignity. Aunt Patty, Randy dear, perhaps this is for the best. Remember Tom and Sally's anniversary party when Tyler knocked over the ice sculpture? Uncle Dave, some events just aren't kid-friendly. Nothing personal. Cousin Beth, I think what they're trying to say is more intimate ceremony equals more elegant. You understand, right? With each new message, the knot in my stomach tightened. These people had known me my entire life. They had watched me grow up, graduate college, become a mother, build a career, and not one of them was standing up for me or my children. Not one was questioning the casual cruelty of excluding family members from a family celebration. I set my phone face down on the counter as it continued to buzz with notifications. Time for breakfast, guys. I called to the children, determined not to let them see how shaken I was. As we ate, Tyler kept shooting concerned glances my way. At 10, he was old enough to sense when adult problems were brewing, but too young to fully understand them. 6-year-old Emma chatted happily about her upcoming school field trip, periodically reaching over to pat my hand when she noticed my distraction. Are you sad, Mommy? She finally asked directly. Your eyes look rainy. I'm just having a grown-up problem, sweetie. I answered, stroking her hair. Nothing for you to worry about. But after I dropped them at school, I sat in my car in the parking lot and finally allowed myself to break down completely. Huge, racking sobs tore through me as the full weight of the rejection settled on my shoulders. It wasn't just about a wedding invitation. It was about years of being treated as lesser, of watching my children be judged and found wanting, of trying so hard to maintain connections with people who fundamentally did not respect me. When I returned home, my phone showed 17 new messages in the family chat. I silenced the conversation without reading them. Whatever additional barbs they had thrown my way would have to wait. I had client work to complete, and I refused to let my family drama impact my professional responsibilities. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I finally allowed myself to look at the messages. Most were variations on the same theme. I was overreacting. I was being selfish. I needed to think of Natalie's happiness rather than my own. The conversation had eventually moved on to discussing which relatives would now be seated at the table originally reserved for me and my children. I curled up on the sofa, wrapped in the quilt my grandmother had made me before she died, and cried until I had no tears left. My grandmother had been different from the rest of the family. She had celebrated my creativity, defended my choices, and loved my children without reservation or judgment. Family is about acceptance, not perfection, she used to say. If she were still alive, I knew she would have been appalled by what had transpired today. By the way, if you're still with me and finding this story unbelievable, make sure to hit subscribe. More real-life dramas and personal triumphs are always coming. As midnight approached, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, beginning to process not just today's events, but the years of subtle and not-so-subtle mistreatment that had led to this point. The wedding exclusion wasn't an anomaly. It was simply the most blatant expression of how my mother and sister truly saw me and my children. The realization was both painful and strangely liberating. For years, I had been chasing approval I would never receive, making excuses for behavior that was inexcusable, and exposing my children to people who viewed them as inconveniences rather than precious family members. No more, I whispered to my empty kitchen. This stops now. The next morning, after getting the kids off to school, I called Zoe, my best friend since college, and the person who had stood by me through every major life challenge of the past decade. They did what? Zoe exploded after I recounted the text exchange in a group chat with everyone watching. Oh my God, Randy, that's beyond cruel. That's psychological warfare. Hearing my own thoughts validated by someone I trusted helped solidify the emotional realization I'd come to the night before. This wasn't a miscommunication or a momentary lapse in judgment on my family's part. It was the culmination of a pattern. I don't know why I'm even surprised, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Remember Emma's 5th birthday, when my mom showed up with a cake because the one I made wasn't presentable enough for guests? Or when your sister scheduled her housewarming party on the same day as Tyler's school play, then got mad that you chose his performance over her new throw pillows," Zoe added. As we talked, more memories surfaced, each one a puzzle piece that had been sitting in plain sight, waiting for me to finally see the complete picture. The time my mother had corrected Tyler's table manners in front of everyone at Christmas dinner, making him so self-conscious he barely touched his food. The casual remarks about how much easier Natalie's life was without all the baggage I had accumulated. The family vacation photos that somehow never included me or my children despite us. Being present. "I think I've been gaslighting myself," I admitted to Zoe, making excuses for them, telling myself it wasn't that bad or that I was being too sensitive. "That's what happens when you grow up with that kind of treatment," Zoe replied gently. "You normalize it. But Randy, there is nothing normal about what they're doing. It's toxic, and you and your kids deserve so much better." After our call, I felt strangely calm, like the eye of an emotional hurricane. The initial shock had passed, and a clear, cold anger had taken its place, but I knew the real emotional processing was still to come. That clarity was shattered when Tyler came home from school that afternoon with red-rimmed eyes and a defensive hunch to his shoulders I recognized all too well. "What happened, buddy?" I asked, sitting beside him on the couch. He was quiet for a long moment. "Jake said we're not going to Aunt Natalie's wedding anymore." Jake was my sister's 10-year-old stepson from her fiancé's previous marriage. "He said it's because we don't know how to act right, and his grandma doesn't want us there." My heart broke all over again, this time for my son. "Tyler, did Jake say that at school? In front of other kids?" Tyler nodded, a single tear escaping before he roughly wiped it away. "He told everyone during lunch. He said his dad is paying for a super fancy wedding and they don't want it ruined." I took a deep breath, tried to contain the fresh wave of anger threatening to overwhelm me. "Tyler, look at me. What Jake said isn't true. The reason we're not going to the wedding has nothing to do with you or your behavior. It's about grown-up problems between me, Grandma, and Aunt Natalie." "Is it because we're not rich like Jake's family?" Tyler asked, with the devastating directness of children. "No, honey. It's because sometimes adults make bad choices that hurt other people's feelings. And when that happens, we need to set boundaries." "What are boundaries?" "Boundaries are rules we set to protect ourselves from people who don't treat us with respect. Like if a friend keeps taking your toys without asking, you might set a boundary by saying they can't play with your things unless they ask permission." Tyler thought about this. "So, we're setting a boundary with Grandma and Aunt Natalie?" "Yes, we are. And that's okay. It doesn't mean we don't love them. It just means we expect to be treated with kindness and respect, just like everyone else." That evening, the calls began. First my mother, then my father, then various aunts and uncles, all delivering variations on the same message. I needed to be reasonable, not make a scene, and still follow through with the venue contribution because it was promised. I let most go to voicemail, but took my father's call. "Randy, you know how your mother gets about these social events," he said, his voice that familiar mix of placating and dismissive that had characterized his approach to family conflict for as long as I could remember. "Just let this one go. We can have a separate family celebration after the honeymoon." "Dad, do you understand what happened here? Mom and Natalie publicly uninvited your grandchildren from a family wedding, humiliating them in the process. Now, their cousin is bullying them about it at school, and you want me to just let it go." "You're blowing this out of proportion," he sighed. "No one meant to hurt the kids. It's just that this wedding is very important for your sister's future. The Wilsons are influential people, more influential than your own grandchildren's emotional well-being," I thought. His silence was answer enough. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, my designer's brain automatically organizing the chaos into something structured. I wrote what we know at the top and began listing facts. 1, my family excluded me and my children from the wedding in the cruelest way possible. 2, they still expect me to contribute $5,000 toward the venue. 3, this is part of a pattern of toxic behavior, not an isolated incident. 4, my children are being actively harmed by this situation. On the next page, I wrote what we don't know and listed the questions still swirling in my mind. 1, how much does James actually know about this situation? 2, what have my mother and sister told the Wilsons about me and my children. 3. What's the real story with the venue payment? Is it already paid? Is it refundable? 4. Who else knows about our exclusion, and what have they been told? With these questions in mind, I decided to do some investigating. The first call I made was to the venue itself, the Grand Pavilion at Lakeside Gardens. I identified myself as Natalie's sister, who was helping with some wedding details. I just wanted to confirm some information about the Thompson-Wilson wedding on the 21st, I said to the venue coordinator, who answered. Of course, let me pull up that file. Yes, here it is. Thompson-Wilson wedding, grand ballroom rental with garden ceremony site, 200 expected guests. Great, that's the one. I'm just double-checking the payment schedule. Has the final payment been made? The coordinator hesitated. I see that the initial deposit was made 2 months ago, but the final payment is actually past due. We've sent several reminders. This was interesting. I was under the impression that payment had already been arranged. My contribution was meant to complete the venue payment. There's a note here about a partial payment from the sister of the bride, the coordinator confirmed, but we haven't received it. According to our contract, the final payment is due 14 days before the event, which would be this coming Friday. Without it, we can't guarantee the reservation will be held. After thanking the coordinator, I sat back, processing this new information. The venue payment wasn't just an extra they were hoping to extract from me. It was a critical component of their budget that they were counting on, despite having explicitly uninvited me from the event. My next call was to my Aunt Susan, my mother's younger sister, and the family member most likely to give me straight answers without an agenda. Aunt Susan, can I ask you something about Natalie's wedding? I need you to be honest with me. Of course, honey. I heard there was some drama about you not attending. Your mother said you were having some personal issues and thought it best to skip it. Her voice was carefully neutral. That's not true. They explicitly uninvited me and the kids. But what I want to know is what they've told James's family about us. Have you met the Wilsons? Susan's long pause told me she was deciding how much to reveal. Yes, I met them at the engagement dinner. Eleanor Wilson is very concerned with appearances. During that dinner, your mother mentioned you only once. She said you were an artist living in another state. I live 20 minutes away from her house. I know. And when James asked if you had children, your mother changed the subject very quickly. I got the distinct impression that she's pretending you have a very different life than you actually do. A cold realization washed over me. They're ashamed of us. They're literally hiding our existence to impress these people. I think your mother sees this as Natalie's big chance to marry into the kind of social circle she's always wanted access to, Susan said carefully. She doesn't want anything to complicate that narrative. And my children and I complicate the narrative. In her mind, yes. You know your mother, Randy, she's always been obsessed with appearances. Remember how she used to make us change clothes 3 times before visiting Grandma at the nursing home? After thanking my aunt for her honesty, I made one more call, this time to a lawyer friend who specialized in contract law. I explained the situation with the venue payment and asked about my legal obligations. If you never signed anything, you have no legal obligation, he assured me. A verbal promise of a gift doesn't constitute a binding agreement. If your name isn't on the venue contract, you're in the clear legally. What if they put my name on the contract without my knowledge? Said I was covering part of the payment. That would be problematic for them, not you. They can't obligate you to a contract you never signed, but it might create complications with the venue if they're expecting your payment. By the end of the day, I had a much clearer picture of what was happening. My mother and sister had been counting on my financial contribution while simultaneously deciding I wasn't worthy of attending the event. They had effectively erased me from their carefully constructed family narrative to impress the Wilsons. And most disturbingly, they saw absolutely nothing wrong with any of this. As I tucked my children into bed that night, watching their innocent faces relaxed in sleep, a steely resolve formed in my heart. This wasn't just about a wedding invitation anymore. This was about teaching my children what it meant to have self-respect, to set healthy boundaries, and to recognize when relationships were damaging rather than nurturing. We deserve better, I whispered, kissing their foreheads. And I'm going to make sure we get it. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The path forward wasn't about revenge or drama, but about justice, self-respect, and breaking unhealthy patterns. I opened my laptop and began organizing my thoughts into a concrete plan of action. First, I consulted again with my lawyer friend Mike about the specifics of the venue situation. We met for coffee near his office, and I brought all the text messages and information I had gathered. Based on everything you've told me, you have no legal obligation to provide this money, Mike confirmed after reviewing the messages. However, if they listed you as a partial payer on the contract without your signature, that could create complications for them with the venue. That's exactly what I suspect happened, I said. My mother has a habit of making commitments on other people's behalf and expecting them to follow through. In that case, I'd recommend formally rescinding your offer in writing. Send an email to both your mother and sister, CC the venue, stating clearly that due to your exclusion from the event, you are withdrawing your previously offered contribution. Won't that make me look vindictive, like I'm trying to sabotage the wedding? Mike shook his head. It's not vindictive to withdraw financial support for an event you've been explicitly told not to attend. It's actually the logical consequence of their decision to exclude you. With Mike's guidance, I drafted a clear, firm email to my mother and sister with the venue coordinator CC'd. The message was professional and factual, without emotional language. I explained that as I had been informed, my presence and that of my children was not welcome at the wedding. I was formally rescinding my offer to contribute to the venue payment. I wished them well with their celebration and requested that they not contact me further about financial contributions to an event we had been prohibited from attending. After sending the email, I blocked both their numbers temporarily. I needed space to implement the rest of my plan without the emotional manipulation I knew would follow. Next, I focused on creating a special alternative day for me and my children on the wedding date. I wanted them to understand that while rejection hurts, we could choose to fill our lives with joy and positive experiences rather than dwelling on exclusion. How would you guys feel about going to Adventure World on the 21st? I asked them over dinner. They've opened that new water slide section you've been wanting to try, Tyler. Their enthusiasm was immediate and genuine. Both kids had been asking to visit this theme park for months, but the tickets weren't cheap, and I had been saving for a special occasion. What better occasion than celebrating our worth as a family unit? Is that the same day as Aunt Natalie's wedding? Tyler asked perceptively. Yes, it is. I thought we could have our own special day while they have theirs. But why aren't we going to the wedding anymore? Emma asked, her small forehead wrinkled in confusion. I took a deep breath, considering how to explain complex adult situations to a 6-year-old. Sometimes, Emma, people make choices that aren't very kind. Grandma and Aunt Natalie have made some. Choices that hurt our feelings. When that happens, it's okay to choose not to spend time with those people for a while. Did we do something bad? Her trembling lower lip nearly broke me. No, sweetie. You didn't do anything wrong at all. This is about them, not us. And instead of feeling sad about missing their party, we're going to have our own amazing day of fun. As the kids discussed which rides they wanted to try first, I reflected on how these conversations were teaching them crucial life lessons about self-worth and healthy relationships. I wanted them to understand that love shouldn't be conditional on meeting someone else's standards of perfection, that true family supports and accepts you as you are, and that it's okay to step back from relationships that consistently make you feel inadequate or unwanted. Over the following days, I continued to ignore the mounting voicemails and messages from various family members. Most were pressuring me to reconsider my stance on the venue payment with increasing degrees of guilt-tripping and manipulation. My father tried to appeal to my sense of family loyalty. My aunt suggested I was being stubborn and selfish. My sister sent a text accusing me of trying to ruin the biggest day of her life. I let them all go unanswered, focusing instead on my work, my children, and the small community of genuine friends who had rallied around us. Zoe organized a movie night for all of us. My neighbor Barbara, a retired teacher who often helped with the kids, brought over homemade cookies and offered extra babysitting hours if I needed a break. My regular client, sensing something was wrong, sent thoughtful messages checking on my well-being. It was during this period of enforced radio silence from my family that I received an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, the male voice on the other end took me by surprise. "Randy, this is James, Natalie's fiancé. I hope you don't mind me calling you directly. I got your number from the family contact list." I hesitated, unsure of his purpose or how much he knew. "Hello, James. This is unexpected." "I'm sure it is. Look, I'll get right to the point. There seems to be some confusion about the wedding guest list, and I'm trying to get clarity. Natalie told me you didn't want to attend our wedding, but then I heard from the venue that there's some issue with the payment you had offered. I'm honestly confused about what's happening." The genuine bewilderment in his voice suggested he truly had no idea about the actual situation. I took a deep breath. "James, I'm going to tell you something that might be difficult to hear. I never said I didn't want to attend your wedding. In fact, until last week, my children and I were under the impression that we were not only invited, but participating in the ceremony. Tyler was supposed to be a junior groomsman, and Emma was going to be a flower girl." "What?" "But Natalie said," he stammered. "She told me you weren't comfortable with formal events and preferred not to come. She said your kids had some behavioral issues that made large gatherings difficult for them." The hurt must have been evident in my silence because he quickly continued, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have repeated that. I'm just trying to understand what's going on. The truth is, James, my mother and sister explicitly uninvited us via group text. They said my children and I make things awkward and would interfere with having a perfect day. They still expected me to contribute $5,000 toward the venue despite uninviting us." "That can't be right," he said, but the uncertainty in his voice suggested he was beginning to question the narrative he'd been given. "I can forward you the entire text exchange if you'd like to see it for yourself. Would you? I'd really appreciate that. This doesn't sound like the Natalie I know, but while there have been some strange tensions around the wedding planning that I haven't fully understood." After our call, I forwarded the entire humiliating text thread to James, along with screenshots of some of the follow-up messages pressuring me to still pay for the venue despite our exclusion. It wasn't about trying to create problems between them, but about finally bringing truth to a situation shrouded in lies and manipulation. James called back 30 minutes later, his voice noticeably shaken. "I don't even know what to say. I had no idea this was happening. My parents have been asking about meeting you and your kids, and Natalie kept making excuses about why it hadn't happened yet. I just assumed you were busy, or maybe there was some minor family tension, not this. I'm sorry you're finding out this way," I said sincerely. "For what it's worth, I think Natalie genuinely cares about you. She just also cares tremendously about impressions and status, a value she inherited directly from our mother. I need to talk to her about this and my parents. They would be horrified if they knew family members were being excluded like this. That's not how we operate." After hanging up, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. I hadn't set out to create drama or come between Natalie and James, but the truth had a way of surfacing eventually. Whatever happened next was out of my hands. I had been honest, set appropriate boundaries, and was focusing on creating a positive experience for my children despite the painful situation. For the next 5 days, I heard nothing from any family members. The sudden silence after days of constant pressure was disconcerting, but also peaceful. I used the time to finalize our Adventure World plans, putting together a small backpack for each child with snacks, sunscreen, and a change of clothes. We talked excitedly about which rides to try first, and whether we would be brave enough for the new vertical drop water slide. As the wedding day approached, I found myself feeling stronger and more centered than I had in years. The initial shock and hurt had transformed into a kind of quiet determination. This experience, painful as it was, had forced me to confront and begin dismantling the dysfunctional patterns that had defined my family relationships for decades. "You seem different, Mom," Tyler observed the night before our planned theme park visit as I tucked him into bed. "Not sad anymore." "I'm different," I agreed. "Sometimes hard things help us grow stronger, like how plants need storms to make their roots dig deeper." I smiled at his insight. "Exactly like that. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be an adventure." The morning of Natalie's wedding dawned bright and clear. I woke before my alarm, a mixture of emotions swirling through me despite my best efforts at detachment. Somewhere across town, my sister was preparing to become a wife. My mother was likely fussing over every detail, determined to create the perfect illusion of family harmony for the Wilsons and other guests. And here I was, choosing a different path entirely. I pushed those thoughts aside as I heard the excited footsteps of my children racing down the hallway. "Mom, is it time to go to Adventure World?" Emma burst into my room, already wearing the swimsuit we had laid out the night before, though inside out and backwards. Tyler followed more sedately, but the gleam in his eyes betrayed his equal excitement. I checked the weather app. It's going to be 87 degrees and sunny, perfect for water slides. I laughed, helping Emma fix her swimsuit. "Let's have breakfast first, then we can head out. The park opens at 10 o'clock. As we ate pancakes, shaped like Mickey Mouse, a special occasion tradition, I kept my phone deliberately turned off and tucked away in a drawer. Today wasn't about what we were missing. It was about what we were choosing to create together. Adventure World lived up to its name. We spent the morning conquering increasingly daring rides, Tyler leading the charge with newfound confidence. Emma squealed with delight as water splashed around us. We took silly photos with costumed characters, indulged in overpriced theme park food, and participated in every interactive game along the midway. During a brief rest on a bench in the shade, Tyler looked up at me with serious eyes. "This is better than a boring wedding anyway, right, Mom?" I consider my answer carefully. Different experiences are valuable in different ways, Tyler. Weddings can be beautiful celebrations of love and family. But today, this is exactly where we're meant to be, having fun together. As the afternoon progressed, Emma won a stuffed unicorn at a ring toss game with some strategic assistance from the teenage booth operator, who was charmed by her determined attempts. Tyler conquered his fear of the tallest water slide, emerging from the splash pool with a triumphant grin. I took dozens of photos, capturing their joy and our connection in a way that felt genuine and precious. By late afternoon, exhaustion began to set in. Emma's steps were dragging, and even Tyler admitted he was kind of tired. We decided to head home, stopping for ice cream on the way as one final treat. It wasn't until we arrived home and the kids were settled in the living room with a movie that I finally retrieved my phone and turned it on. Immediately, it began buzzing with a cascade of notifications. 15 missed calls, 23 text messages, 7 voicemails. The first voicemail, from my mother at 10:30 that morning, was surprisingly composed. "Randy, I hope you'll reconsider your position about the venue payment. The wedding starts at 4 o'clock, and we need to resolve this before then. Call me back immediately." The second, from noon, had a distinct edge of panic. "Randy, this is getting ridiculous. The venue manager is saying there's an issue with the final payment. Call me back right now." By the third voicemail, left at 1:15, my mother's carefully maintained composure had completely crumbled. "Randy, please, you have to help us. The venue manager is threatening to cancel everything if the final payment isn't made by 3 o'clock. I don't know what you said to them, but they're insisting the contract listed you as a partial payer, and they can't proceed without your payment or signature removing you from the agreement. Please." Natalie is in tears. "You can't ruin her wedding like this." The remaining messages grew increasingly desperate, culminating in a sobbing Natalie begging me to just sign the stupid paper or pay the money because the venue manager was being completely unreasonable and the photographer and florist were already there setting up. I sat down at my kitchen table, absorbing this unexpected turn of events. I had sent that email to the venue to clarify my position, not to actively create problems for the wedding. I had assumed my mother would simply cover the payment gap herself or find another solution. After making sure the kids were engrossed in their movie, I called the venue directly. The manager explained that my mother had indeed listed me as a responsible party for part of the payment on the contract, creating a legal complication when I explicitly withdrew my offer. "We try to be flexible," she explained, "but when no payment was forthcoming and no amended agreement was signed, we had to follow our contract terms. We couldn't hold the space without full payment." "Has the situation been resolved?" I asked. Not to my knowledge. The last update I received was that they were attempting to secure an alternative venue for a scaled-down version of the reception. The ceremony was moved to the church that was originally just for the service. After thanking her for the information, I sat in silence, processing everything. I hadn't intended to disrupt the wedding itself, only to establish boundaries around my own financial and emotional involvement. Yet, it seemed my mother's presumption in putting my name on legal documents without my consent had created exactly the chaos she had claimed to be avoiding by excluding us. At 7:30, after getting the children bathed and into pajamas, I finally returned my mother's calls. She answered immediately. "It's a bit late to call now, isn't it?" Her voice was brittle with exhaustion and barely contained fury. "I've been busy all day with the kids. I just got your messages. What happened with the wedding? As if you don't know. Your little stunt nearly ruined everything. We had to move the reception to the church basement at the last minute. Half the floral arrangements couldn't be transferred. The cake arrived at the original venue and had to be rushed across town. The photographer charged extra for the venue change. Eleanor Wilson was horrified by the disorganization. "I'm sorry things were complicated," I said carefully. "But I don't understand why you put my name on a contract without my permission. That created this problem, not my withdrawal of a gift I was never obligated to give in the first place." "Gift? This was your sister's wedding. Family helps family. Family also doesn't exclude family from important life events via group text." The line went quiet for a moment. "Is that what this was about? Revenge because your feelings were hurt?" "No, Mom. This was about respecting myself and my children enough to not financially support people who treat us as embarrassments. This was about showing my kids that it's not okay to let people use you while simultaneously pushing you aside." "Oh, that's rich coming from you. Always so righteous about your choices. Never mind how they affect everyone else. Do you have any idea the damage you've caused?" James's parents left early. They said they'd never seen such a disorganized event. Before I could respond, I heard Natalie's voice in the background demanding the phone. "You vindictive bitch," my sister hissed when she got on the line. "You couldn't stand that I was having something special, could you? You had to make it all about you and your issues." "Natalie, I didn't create this situation. All I did was withdraw financial support from an event I was explicitly told not to attend. The consequences came from Mom putting my name on legal documents without my knowledge or consent. You could have just paid it anyway, or signed their stupid form. You knew how important this day was to me, and you knew how hurtful it was to uninvite your niece and nephew from being in your wedding party. You knew how humiliating it was to exclude your own sister via group text. You made your choices, and I made mine." The conversation devolved further, with Natalie alternating between tearful accusations and angry threats about how I would regret this and never be forgiven. I remained calm, repeatedly bringing the focus back to the actual sequence of events and the natural consequences of their actions. After hanging up, I was surprised to receive a text message from James. "I want you to know that none of this was your fault. What happened today opened my eyes to some dynamics I hadn't fully recognized. Thank you for your honesty. I hope someday we can start fresh as family." The next day, social media was conspicuously quiet. Typically, my mother and sister would have been posting professional wedding photos with carefully crafted captions about the perfect day and beautiful celebration. Their silence spoke volumes about how far the reality had diverged from their expectations. 3 days later, I received a surprising call from Eleanor Wilson, James's mother. "Randy, this is Eleanor Wilson, James's mother. I hope you don't mind me calling. James gave me your number." "Not at all, Mrs. Wilson. How can I help you?" "Please call me Eleanor. I wanted to reach out personally to invite you and your children to brunch this Sunday. James has told us so much about his new niece and nephew, and we're eager to meet you all." I was momentarily speechless. "That's very kind of you. We'd be happy to come." "Wonderful. And Randy, I want you to know that James has explained the circumstances surrounding the wedding. My husband and I were quite disturbed to learn how you and your children were treated. That's not the kind of family values we raised our son with." After we arranged the details for Sunday, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this unexpected turn of events. Somehow, in attempting to erase me from their perfect family narrative, my mother and sister had instead revealed the true dysfunction that had been lurking beneath the surface all along. The brunch with the Wilsons turned out to be a pivotal moment in our family's journey. Harold and Eleanor welcomed us into their spacious but comfortable home with genuine warmth. Unlike the intimidating elitists my mother had portrayed, they were down to earth and immediately engaged with my children in a way that put them at ease. "Tyler, James tells me you're quite the baseball player," Harold said, showing him a collection of signed memorabilia in his study. "Emma, would you like to see the dollhouse that was mine when I was a little girl?" Eleanor asked. "I've kept it all these years, hoping someday I'd have a granddaughter to share it with." As the children explored these treasures, Eleanor joined me on the patio with glasses of iced tea. "I want to be direct with you, Randy," she said after some pleasantries. "What your mother told us about you and what we've learned for ourselves are very different things." "What exactly did she tell you?" I asked, finally able to confirm my suspicions. "That you lived out of state, that you had made lifestyle choices the family found difficult, that you struggled with stability." Her diplomatic phrasing couldn't fully disguise the implication. "And now I see a devoted mother raising two wonderful children. James speaks highly of your work as a designer. And most importantly, I see someone who had the strength to stand up for herself and her children in a difficult situation." "It wasn't about revenge," I said, feeling it important that she understand. "It was about not allowing my children to internalize the message that they weren't good enough." "I understand that better than you might think," Eleanor said, surprising me. "My own mother was similar to yours in many ways. Appearances meant everything. I wasn't the daughter she wanted either." That conversation marked the beginning of an unexpected alliance. While my own mother maintained a chilly distance following the wedding debacle, the Wilsons began regularly including me and my children in family gatherings. Emma and Tyler developed a genuine friendship with their new uncle, James, who turned out to have a talent for connecting with children that surprised even Natalie. In the months that followed, I committed to therapy, finally unpacking the years of conditional love and subtle undermining that had shaped my self-perception. My therapist helped me understand that the wedding incident hadn't created the family dysfunction. It had merely exposed patterns that had existed for decades. "Your mother has narcissistic tendencies," my therapist explained. "And your sister learned early on that emulating your mother's values was the path to approval. Neither of them is likely to fundamentally change without their own committed therapy work." With this understanding, I began to establish clearer boundaries with my family of origin. I declined Sunday dinners that invariably devolved into criticism sessions. I limited phone conversations with my mother to 15 minutes and redirected when she began disparaging me or the children. I filtered information carefully, sharing only what felt safe and keeping our most precious moments private. The children flourished under these new boundaries. Tyler's teacher commented on his increased confidence at school, noting he was participating more in class discussions and had made new friends on the playground. Emma's occasional anxiety about being good enough for activities gradually faded, replaced by a natural enthusiasm for trying new things without fear of harsh judgment. My business grew as well, as I redirected energy previously spent managing family drama into developing my client base and refining my skills. I secured several large corporate contracts that provided greater financial stability than the piecemeal work I had relied on before. When Thanksgiving approached, I braced myself for the usual complicated negotiations about holiday gatherings. To my surprise, James called with an invitation. "We're hosting at our place this year," he said. "Eleanor suggested we start some new traditions. We'd really love for you and the kids to join us." "What about my mother and father?" I asked carefully. "They've been invited, too, but with clear expectations about behavior." "Eleanor had a rather direct conversation with your mother about how family members are to be treated in our home." The Thanksgiving gathering was tense at times, but ultimately healing. My mother was noticeably subdued, lacking her usual audience for critical comments. My father seemed relieved by the structure Eleanor subtly imposed on the interactions. Natalie, 6 months into marriage, and faced with her husband's obvious affection for his niece and nephew, made awkward but genuine attempts to connect with Tyler and Emma. After the holiday, Natalie reached out and asked if we could meet for coffee. We sat in a quiet corner of a local cafe, both of us uncharacteristically nervous. "I'm not good at this," she began after several minutes of small talk. "Admitting when I've been wrong isn't exactly a skill Mom taught either of us." "No, it wasn't," I agreed, waiting for her to continue. "The wedding was a disaster," she said bluntly. "Not because of the venue change, but because I let Mom convince me that appearances matter more than actual relationships. James was really upset with me afterward in ways I didn't expect." "How so?" "He said he didn't recognize the person I became during the wedding planning. That excluding you and the kids showed a side of me he found disturbing. We've been in couples counseling since then." I was surprised by her candor. That couldn't have been easy to hear. It wasn't, but he wasn't wrong. She twisted her napkin nervously. "I'm not asking for forgiveness right away. I know what we did was cruel. I just want to know if there's a way forward eventually. Tyler and Emma are the only niece and nephew I'll ever have, and I've been a terrible aunt. Healing takes time," I said carefully. "I'm open to rebuilding our relationship, but it needs to be different than before. My priority is protecting my children from the kind of treatment we've all normalized for too long." Over the following months, Natalie made consistent, if sometimes awkward, efforts to connect with me and the children. She came to Tyler's school play. She remembered Emma's birthday with a thoughtfully selected art set rather than the usual generic gift card. Small steps, but meaningful ones. My mother proved less capable of change. She maintained that I had overreacted to the wedding situation and deliberately caused problems to get attention. When I held firm to my boundaries, she adopted a martyr position, telling extended family that I was keeping her grandchildren away and that she was trying so hard, but Randy makes it impossible. Eventually, I accepted that my relationship with my mother might never be what I had hoped for as a child. Instead of endlessly trying to earn her approval or change her perspective, I focused on breaking the cycle with my own children. They would grow up knowing their worth didn't depend on meeting impossible standards or fitting someone else's image of perfection. The family you're born into isn't always the family that nurtures you, I explained to Tyler one evening after a particularly difficult phone call with my mother. Sometimes we have to create our own chosen family of people who love us as we are. "Like Aunt Zoe and Miss Barbara next door?" he asked. "Exactly. And now Uncle James and the Wilsons too. And we're a family, the three of us," Emma added with the simple wisdom of childhood. "The best family." As I hugged my children close, I reflected on the painful journey that had led us to this point of greater health and authenticity. The wedding text that had initially felt like such a devastating rejection had ultimately been the catalyst for profound change. By standing up for myself and my children, I had broken generations of toxic patterns and created space for genuine connections to flourish. Forgiveness, I was learning, didn't require reconciliation with those who remained committed to harmful behavior. It meant releasing the anger that tied me to the pain while maintaining the boundaries that protected our well-being. It meant acknowledging the reality of who people were rather than clinging to fantasies of who I wish they would become. Most importantly, it meant teaching my children through example that love shouldn't hurt, that family should be a source of support rather than stress, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from relationships that diminish rather than enhance your life. Today, 2 years after that fateful wedding text, our lives have found a new equilibrium. My relationship with Natalie continues to slowly heal through mutual effort and respect. James has become the kind of uncle my children deserve. The Wilsons have embraced us as genuine family members. My father makes occasional efforts to connect on his own terms rather than as my mother's messenger, and my mother remains at a carefully managed distance, allowed limited access under specific conditions. It isn't the family story I would have written for myself as a young girl, but it's authentic, honest, and ultimately healthier than the facade we maintained for so many years. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What helped you find the strength to prioritize your well-being over unhealthy family expectations?